Hi, everybody. My name is Miggy. I'm a designer advocate for education here at Figma. I'm joined by Alex. Alex is a manager on the Figma for EDU team. So we are here today. We show up every month and run this workshop for students, for educators, for those of you that are just getting started on your design journeys. Hey, Alex, how's it going? I'm going to say hi to Alex back. Hi. Alex, and then I'm gonna put in some exclamation points in there too. Hey Alex, how's it going? So I'm using the cursor chat function in Figma that can be accessed by right clicking on your canvas, and you can see cursor chat on my keyboard. It's going to be that / key that's going to allow me to say hello. All right, so once again, we're going to start talking about variables and modes today. We're going to do a quick intro. We're going to do a step-by-step, and the majority of the work that we're going to do today is going to center around a single example. We want to make sure that you can understand where to go in the file, how to use these. I'm not going to dig too deeply into the most rigorous of process that design systems teams use, but what I want you to do is know how to use the feature accordingly. So then this way you can think about it, you can attempt it, you can kind of build out your own components and build out your own designs with a systems mindset. So we're going to be digging deep into how best to work with variables from that beginner's mindset. Here in this second page, you'll see that I have a simple card layout. This is incomplete, right? So we're going to be building upon this. So once again, Alex has dropped in the chat a link to the community file. That's the file that I'm currently in. And when you open that file up, what you can do is you can kind of navigate and see some things in the way that I'm demonstrating. You don't have to follow along fully. Remember, this is being recorded. So as you follow along, as you have questions, feel free to ask them. But remember, this is being recorded and you'll be able to follow along, at your own pace. For now, we just want to make sure we cover all of those concepts. All right, cool. This third page over here, once again, we're in the Figma interface. Let me make it just a smidge bigger. Over here on the left, you see the pages. The pages are going to allow you to navigate to those different slides. In that third slide, in the third page, we have some slides here that you can check out. So first off, what are variables, right? What variables are there ways to set values to objects that you can kind of control from a singular location, right? So the variables that you can use today in Figma are essentially going to be references to colors, numbers, strings. And what a string is just plain text. So anything that is like human readable text, and Booleans. Booleans are things that are true or false or on or off, right? We've done a previous workshop in Figma where we covered many of these variables in reference to prototyping. You can find that here. You can see that video that's here back in the intro. Okay. So we're going to be talking about variable types and the way that they can be applied to your layouts. So then this way you can have consistency across your designs that you can control at a global level. You can even publish these values. So then that way they're available to others when you're working with them. So let's say you're working with a team and you want to make sure you're all using the same correct colors. This is going to give you the ability to do so. Then if you decide to make changes later, those updates can then be pushed to everyone else. So that's why we're doing that here. One thing that I do want to highlight is that we have recently expanded in Figma the objects that can accept variables as their properties. Now, variables are still in beta, which means it's still a work in progress. So variables aren't available for everything. I know many of you are asking questions about when are variables going to be available for typography. The answer is not quite yet. They're going to be coming. We've already announced it, but as of today, you can't use variables for typography just yet. So when we talk about colors, numbers, strings, and Booleans, these are all the things that they can be applied to. So today we're going to be covering like fill colors, stroke colors, shadow effect colors, right? Then we're also going to be talking about how you can apply numbers to adjust corner radii, padding. So these are all properties of objects that you're designing. Whenever you design something on the canvas, you're placing it onto the canvas and you're adjusting its properties. You're adjusting its color, its size, its width, its height. So many of these values can be controlled and sort of centralized with those variables. All right. So let's see. And let's go. I'm going to head right on over to the workshop example. So we're going to begin right here. I'm going to click onto the workshop example page. I'm going to click on my canvas. So the canvas is any area here that's gray, right? So I'm clicking on my canvas. And when you click on your canvas, you'll notice this option over here on the right that says local variables. Variables are local to your file as you're working on them. So that means that they are scoped, that they only exist currently in this file. When I open that variables pane, it's going to produce this table layout. So this is all of the variables that I currently have in this document. I've started you off with some just so we can begin this discussion. So you'll notice over here in the top left where it says basic primitives, and there's also one called semantic values. We're going to dig into what that means, but what I want you to do is just kind of look and see this table layout. For each variable, what you do is you have a name and you have a value. So here you will see when I go to my basic and primitives collection, you're going to have many collections of variables that you can name and you can organize as you work and as your designs become more complex or as you're working with others. So here we just have those two collections. Here in my basic primitives collection, you'll see that I have these groupings. You'll see I have a grouping of some grays. I have some brand colors that are available, and I have some basic units. These units are not currently part of a group. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all three of those. I'm going to right click and I'm going to create a new group. And I'm just going to call this new group, I'm just going to call it, let's say, units for now, right? So once again, we've talked about variables and we're trying to figure out like what are they going to be used for. Let's do our most basic thing. I'm going to press the R key and draw a rectangle on my canvas, right? And this rectangle is here on my canvas. Now when I go to change a property of it, right? So this is the object, it's on my canvas. Over here in the design panel, you'll see that it has a fill property, and by default, it has a color that's represented by the hex code D9, D9, D9. And just so y'all, if you don't speak hex code, the first two represent red, the second two represent green, and the third two represent blue. So if they have an equal value of all three, it's always going to be some type of gray. When I click on these four dots over here, right, I'm going to see this option for libraries. And what this libraries is doing, it's pulling up the variables that I have available. So you can see I have my grays, I have my red, orange, etc. So I'm going to choose this brand color of red. And you'll see that now when I select it, its fill is showing that variable. Okay. All right. So if I want to create a new variable, right, I can go to my local variables pane. I'm here in my basic primitives. I have a red, an orange, and a green. I can create a new variable right here. So I'm going to create a new variable and I can choose its type. Let's say we want to create for ourselves a blue variable. I'm going to go click on that color, right? And let's see, where's there it is. There's our color. I'm going to just say you are blue, and I'm going to pick a blue value to work from. So there we go. I got my blue color, and I can drag this over into my brand colors. So you see I have my blue represented by these hex values right here. And then you'll also notice there's some options to edit this variable that gives me these advanced features, which we'll be talking about in just a quick moment. But we have our blue value. So now I can close this out. And this rectangle, I can have it go from being that red value instead to that blue value. And you see it shows brand colors blue. This way you have your specific blue that you're going to be referencing. So if I had other objects, right? So I have this circle here. Let's create a star, and let's create a let's say like another polygon here. I'm very fond of the hex codes, the hexagons. There we go. It's the hexagon. So I can select that. I can come over here to my fill. I'm going to click on those four dots, and I can choose blue for each of them. Right. So click on those four dots. It's our library. These are our variables. They're all set to blue. Now, when I go to my local variables, right, remember to see that you're going to click on the canvas. I'm going to come over here, right? There's my blue. If I change this blue, let's say we go a little bit lighter blue, right? That change is now reflected in all of those colors because they're all referencing that same variable. So that variable, its name sort of represents whatever that color is and can change over time. All right. Okay, cool. So we can always revisit it. These are our local variables. They're in our page. Let's say if I wanted to change, this color, I can click on that and I can see the other brand colors that I have available. And there they are. They're showing up. Now let's apply some other variables to some other properties of these objects, right? Let's say I am going to make that one blue again. Now, let's say we have a corner radius, right? I like to have little rounded corners, right, on my shape. So here, corner radius is another property, right? So property of this shape that we can manipulate. So here we go. This is the corner radius. It's over here in the design panel. When I select my object, I go over to the design panel, and when I hover over it, I will see this little icon. That icon should be familiar to you because it's the variables icon. When you go to the page, you're going to see this little hex value with the little circle in the middle. That's going to represent that particular property, the property of this corner radius, can be associated with a variable. So that rounded corner, if I click on it, you can see that I already have some variables that are associated here. So I can click a base unit of 16. So what this is now being applied to that unit of 16, right? If I want to change that, I want to show you once again how this can be changed, but let's also apply that corner radius to all of these other objects that we have here, right? I can click on that, and let's going to apply this to our 16 value. They all have it applied. So when I go to my local variables, I have these unit values. These are numbered units. So let's create another number. I'm going to create a variable. We're going to create another number. Here it is. And I can say, what are we calling them? I call a base unit. So base unit is 4, base unit 2 is 8, base unit 3 is 16. Maybe we're not ascribing the value. If we think about those as multiples, we might want to edit this a little bit. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag it down here, or I can just click to the left and I can see here's all my units. So that number that we just created, we can give it a name. I'm going to say base dash unit dash 4, right? And we can apply that value. And that actually might be 16. Let's move that down. And this base unit 3 is actually 12. There we go. So that base unit 3 value, right? So we're doing 4, 8, 12, 16. This is just a unit that we want to control our designs as having. So they're all going to share these units. So then that way they're going to be a bit more harmonious, and we can choose when and where to use which base unit. So now this value of 12 is currently being ascribed to the corner radius of these objects. I mean, the circle doesn't matter, but these ones do. So if I increase that value, you can see that they all accept that value. So right now, when I drag, or let's say, and I start with 0 and I press the up value, right? I'm pressing up. Whoop, I press shift. That makes too many. So if I'm pressing up, as that number is increasing, you're going to see that those corner radii are also increasing until they reach their limit. And what that means is, they're referencing that value. So Having these variables defined in this manner is going to give you unparalleled control on your designs. So how does it know the numbers for corner radius? The reason that it knows the numbers for corner radius, let's set that back to 12, is because we associated it with such. So if I were to click once again on this object that I had here, you'll see that its corner radius, it's a property over here on the right in the design panel. So it's already set to that base unit 3. I can set it to base unit 4 and it's now the 16, right? I can set it back to base unit and now it's set to 4. So I'm setting that particular value. So I can just give it a number. I could just say 250, but that number is only being ascribed here. I want it to reference the variable and I want it to be global in nature. So if I were to change that on a larger scale, it's referencing that, and all of the elements that contain and that use the variable for their corner radius can make use of it. So here, let's bring that down. I'm going to click on that hex dial, right? And I can set it back to base unit 3. And that is now 12. Cool. All right. So you can also set the, so some values you can see right here, I can set the base unit. Any property that has this little hex value is going to allow you to set a value to it. And just like I said, I can click on the desktop. I can go to local variables. I can name this whatever I want, right? So I can come here and I could say number, right? And I can give this a more specific value, like a name that is more specific to its job. Like, what is it going to do? When we're in design, we refer to these as semantic values when a variable is referencing the job that it's performing. So if I was to say, base dash corner dash radius, right? That's the corner radius. I can set that value. Let's say we're going to start it at 2. So I have my base corner radius at 2. So now this variable is going to be available locally in my document. So I can select all of these objects. Like I said, the circle doesn't matter. Let's lose the circle for now. But here I have a star. I have this rectangle. I have this hexagon. When I come over to the corner radius property, I can find the value that I'm looking for and I can search. So I could say base corner radius. I can start to search. Once again, I'm over here in the design panel on the right. I type in the value, the variable name that I'm looking for. There we go. And I apply it. So right now it's set to 2. And because it's referencing this variable that I have here, I can edit them by updating this field. So by increasing that number, you see that corner radius increase, and by decreasing that number, it then decreases. So the way that I want y'all to think about this is that fundamentally, when we're designing, right, if we were to design something like this card, we're modifying properties. So here, let's say this is like a little brand divider, right? We're referencing that color, we're referencing its height. When we're using text, we're referencing the color of the text. And I have an icon, I'm referencing the color of the icon. And even here, I can have a color for that stroke, a color for this text, color for this icon. So if I want to think about changing those, I can change them. So someone's asking, are there ways to lock the variable table and the values to only a specific designer in the file? That's actually a fantastic question. So the way that you do that is you're working in a file and you're working with these variables. So this file has these tables, right? And, I have these, what I call primitives, and I have these semantic values, right? So this is like chip spacing, corner radius, right? I have these things, they kind of already exist. Now I want to share them with a designer, and I don't want them to edit that. Like I'm sharing this out. I don't want everybody to have access. So what I can do is I can publish this. So as long as you're in an education team or higher, you're in a pro team, you can't use the free plan for this, but you can in an education team. And education teams are free. So what I can do is I can publish this file as a library. When I go to publish library, you'll see that I'm publishing two variable collections, right? And I can choose whether or not I want to publish these. So let's say my basic values I don't want to publish out. I could actually say hide that from publishing. I only want to publish my semantic values, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. But I have here also the components that I have. But the important thing is that I'm publishing these colors. So I'm going to hit publish. It's going to assemble that together. It's going to publish that library. And now within this team, I have another file. So let's see right here. I'm in another file. I'm going to go back to my files so you can see that I have a team here, right? This is my education team. In my team, I have a project. And in this project, I have another file. I'm going to open this file up. And in here, what I can do is I can go to this assets folder and I can explore libraries. So any libraries that have been published recently, and I can find the variables and modes in Figma. Let's add that to my file. And now that that's been added to my file, right, I can see, boom, here I have my components. And when I go to draw a rectangle, I can see these are the colors that I made available, right? And it's right there. Now, if I go to local variables, I won't see anything because the variables aren't local. They're being pulled in from that external file. So I'll show you that one more time. So here, this is the file where I'm currently working, right? This is my main file. This is my library file. And what I'm doing is as I'm building out my variables table, right? I'm designing, I'm making reusable elements that other people on my team are going to use. When I'm working with designers, they're going to use these as their, as their base bits, right? So they might be designing, like a web page, and they're going to have many of these different cards, right? There's going to be tons of these things. So I want to publish this file for them. When I click up here to the kind of file options, there's the publish library option. I just made a change. So it's going to tell me, okay, like, do you want to publish those primitives? I'm just going to say, let's say yes. I'm going to hit publish. So I'm going to make more of those colors available to use with the other designers that are on that team. So here I'm back in my other file. And once again, this file is located inside of the team, right? This is the education team. This is a project. This project has multiple files. This one here, when you see that little black icon with the pen, that means that this has been published as a library. So the components, the colors, the styles, the variables, all of those are now available to everybody else on this team. So when I open this up, I can see, the other things that are available. There we go. I have that brand color of blue. I can now access it. I can change that color because that has now been updated. So that's effectively how you do that. So someone's saying, can a variable equal a mathematical expression? So right now you can't do mathematical expressions with variables. It's something that we're aware of that, folks definitely want to do. So I would say stay tuned for that as well. Yes, I will be talking about aliasing variables. So here I'll show you one quick moment. All right, so we've talked about having our local variables, right? So we have these colors, we have this system, we created all of our grays, we can change our gray, make little updates and we can publish those out. But right now, let's say these are our primitive values, right? This is our base blue, our base red, our base orange. Um, oh, and I'm going to explain that in just a bit, of the difference between style and color. But so let's say our basic values are here. We can reference these and give them names that are more indicative of the job they're going to perform in the design. And that's what's referred to as like a semantic value or a semantic color. And a lot of people, they refer to these as tokens. So in this table, in this collection that I created. So here we go. You can create multiple collections to house these values. I just have these most basic primitive units that I can then build upon and give them naming structures that make a lot more sense when you're building out designs. So in here, what I can do is I have another collection called my semantic values. So I don't have too many here because I don't want to overwhelm you all with how large this library can potentially get, but I want you to at least begin to understand this concept. So each of the variables here allows you to reference an existing variable. So here I can create a new variable. So in the same way that we made a card corner radius, right? I have a spacing. So I have chip spacing. Chip spacing, these are the chips, and I can modify the spacing in between them as a value. So I'm going to create another variable, and I can make this a number, and I'm going to say, card dash um, row dash spacing, and I can reference an existing variable. So you'll see that this icon shows up here to the right, and I can click that and I can find another unit to base it off of. So I can have my card row spacing and I can base that off of, let's say, a unit of 2. So right now, this variable is referencing another variable definition, which is here. This is referred to as aliasing. And the aliasing allows you just to have a bit more naming control and kind of create names that are a little bit better. So if I have a ton of values that are referencing a base value, I can have that consistency across my design. But if I need to alternate or change it up, it still gives me that flexibility to reference another value in my design. All right. Cool. So are y'all with me so far? I know it's a lot and you're just like, these values, what are they doing? So let's walk through that. So this new semantic value that I created, remember, you got to click all variables here if you don't have a group. So I can select these and put within my collection. I can make a group, and I can name this group, my brand colors. And we're going to talk about brand colors in just a moment with modes. So I have my brand colors. I can click on all variables again, and I can change, okay, these are going to be my spacing. I'm going to right click, create a new group with that selection. We're going to double click on that. And we're going to call this, spacing and UI, right? So I can control these and modify them. Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you. So what I'm going to do now is, like, I have these values here. Let's take that card row spacing, and let's take a look at our card that we have here. And this card, making use of auto layout. Once again, I know we're not covering auto layout here, but the card is kind of deconstructed in that there's these 3 rows, right? There's a row of a title, there's a row of some tags, and there's a row of some chips, right? And those 3 rows have some spacing between them, right? So that spacing can be adjusted using auto layout. And what I can do with that spacing, you'll notice over here in the right, there's auto layout and there's this value of 16, but I can actually apply that as a variable. So once again, if you're in the file with me, we have this whole list of the current things that can be modified via variables, right? And that list is going to continue to grow. So it's good to start now, understand what you can do, and then see the new values that you can use a little bit later on once this begins to move out of beta. So once again, I'm going to come in, I'm going to double click, right? I have this spacing here. I'm going to come over here to the right where that value is currently defined in the design panel, and I'm going to apply a variable, and I can look for the card row spacing. I could type that out. We could see here card row spacing, and I can apply it. And that card row spacing, right? You'll see a slight gray kind of like hover, right? And when I hover over it, it tells me the name, and it says exactly where it is. It says this variable is in the spacing and UI group, and is called card row spacing. So if I want to modify that, right? And the reason that we use this is because you're going to have a lot of cards. You're going to design a lot of elements, and you might want to make some adjustments later. And you could easily do that in the centralized location. So I can come to my semantic value. And here, if I want to change my spacing as opposed to like kind of like a 2 multiplier, I could change it to a 3 multiplier, and we'll actually see that change live. So once again, let's change it to a 4 multiplier, and you can see over here how that's impacting, that design. So I'm using those values, and then anything else that's using those values will also be updated. All right. Take care, Antonio. Go enjoy your pizza. So once again, I'm going to hop over here. You can see that we have some other spacing values, right? We have these 16 values. And the reason you would create the aliasing would allow you to adjust those values independently. So let's say here I want to adjust this padding that I have here on the side. I can create another variable, right? And that could be my card padding, card dash padding. And as I create new cards and as I create other elements, right, I can have that more centralized. So you can see here, we have that padding of 16. I'm going to move this up here, right? We have that padding of 16, right? There it is. Let's apply that variable. And I'm going to type in card padding. Right now, card padding is set to 0, but because we're going to alias it, we're going to use, I could apply the base unit. I could see it there. Let's try a base unit of 2. Maybe want to go a little bit more, and let's do a base unit of 3. Maybe that's great, and we're happy. And you can see here that way we have like independent control over the spacing and padding. And if we go to make new cards, they can all use and reference those same values. All right. Cool. So I'm going to head back on over to our slides. And we're going to talk next about theming in just a moment. But I do want you all to just take note of some of these slides. All of these slides are referencing the variables playground file. So if you want to go in and really deep dive on your own, you can check out this variables file. They're made by other advocates on our team as well. And I just want to highlight a few things here. Oh, here we go. What is the difference between creating styles and variables for color? I will explain that super easily. So some of you may have used styles in the past, right? So here, when I click on the 4 dots, right, there's actually a different option. So you can actually create what are known as styles. So if I have a color, I can create a style, or I can create a variable. Think of a variable as one single unit, whereas a style is a composite. So a variable would be one color, but a style can be many layered colors and even include an image. So a variable is more of a primitive versus a style, which is more of a composite. So I'll show you really quickly here. So if I was to take a photo, I'm going to grab a photo of Alex. So here we go. I have a photo of Alex. So I have a photo of Alex, and here's a fill, right? I'm going to add another fill to that. And this fill can actually use one of our colors, right? And let me see here. That color doesn't have, oh, I wouldn't control the opacity on it. Let me remove that. But it could be one of those. I'm going to reduce the opacity of it. So here, right, I could do multiply. Let's do a screen color on it. Let's add in another one. Let's throw a gradient on that, right? So here, what I'm doing is I'm making a composite of multiple properties, right? So images aren't variables yet. I'm using this gradient, I'm using this color. And so here, what I can do is create a style that is then reusable that uses multiple properties. So when I create that style, any shape that I generate, so I can come here, I can make an ellipse. And so here, what I can do is I can pull up the styles that I have. Oops. So far, it looks the same, but it's easier to use and share, right? So the style is going to actually, you'll see right here, this image says three paints. The style, it's kind of like going to be located under those, is can be applied. Let me find it. Here it is. Here's our style. To like anything, it's more of a composite. So there's multiple things being applied to it at the same time. Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad that you found that helpful. So you can actually have like a variable as part of a style, but the styles still have kind of merit and value. And as we're kind of continuing to develop variables, we're going to have more control in kind of making those composite styles. Great. All right, let's hop back on out. The next thing that I wanted to talk about, we're going to talk about modes, and we're going to talk about theming, right? So, one of the cool aspects about having variables is you can now have modes, which will allow you to switch between them. So, the most common example is to have a dark mode where you can have all of your variables ascribed to different properties of a design, but then you can change that into a different mode, and then the variables can swap to another value. And that can be referenced in that variables pane that we have. So this here is a card design that I have, right? So this is a definition. I can go to my assets panel into my like local components and I could drop in another card. So these are instances of this main component that was built there. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to begin to build this up. I want to set up some of these properties here. So I'm going to command click on that shape. Here we go. We have our fill. I'm going to go to the libraries. Let's make that a gray 200, right? I have this text here. Let's say, oh, I don't have a value for it, right? So I go here, I go to the fill, go to my libraries. I don't have a value to represent that text. So I'm going to go to my local variables. Let's go to our basics and primitives. I'm going to add in a color. I'm just going to call this my black, and this is going to be very dark. And then let's add in another one, and let's call this, our, oops, that's a number variable. We don't want a number variable. So I'm going to right click and delete that. I'm going to create another variable. This is another color, and I'm going to call this our white. And this is going to be our pure white. I can select those, and I can even drop them into our grays because, why not? They're essentially our gray values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my text here. I'm going to select that title. I'm going to give it a fill color that is referencing the black. Let's select all of these. Actually, here I'm going to use another component there. I'm going to make this our like dark gray, right? And these chips, I'm actually going to change that at its main component level and make that the dark gray there. These stroke values, right? The stroke value on here, once again, I can apply as like a gray, right? And we're let's say this brand color here, I can set that up as our orange. I'm going to command click on that banner. This is going to be our red, and I'm going to command click on that green, and we're going to just reference our green for the time being. There we go, our official icon. All right, so we have these things set up. Now, with modes, what we can do is begin to change those values out. And I also realized that that I did these here. These actually need the brand color names. Let me just change that up really quick. There's semantic values. Let's see, brand primary. Let's say brand secondary, and these little fellas here. Let's say that's brand secondary, and this is, and you can see why now too, right? Official icon, there we go. You can see why now too this is going to matter, the difference between the base colors and the semantic values. It's going to start making sense right now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new mode, right? When I click plus, I now have two modes. And I want to do that here in the semantic values. So I'm going to create a new mode. This can be our default mode, right? This is light mode. This is the original one. And then this can be our dark mode, right? And we could even have, I'm gonna just say over here, like our Barbie mode, even. I like doing Barbie modes. And what that means is we can now reference these colors and do different things. So I'm going to create a variable here. I'm going to create a color. This is going to be called foreground, um, text. And let's create another variable here. How are we doing? We're doing good on some. It's going to be background, card, and I can reference our existing library. So I could say our foreground text is going to be black, our background card, that's going to be white. And then let's say in dark mode, it's going to be the reverse, right? Our foreground text is going to be our white value, and our background card, may very well be our black value. So I can swap those out. And then let's say in Barbie mode, right? I'm just going to go full Barbie, right? We're going to have our text be Barbie in our background, here we go. So we have like different colors we can assign. So here we have our light mode that references our base values. We have our dark mode that references our base values and kind of swap them out. Then we have our Barbie mode. And then we could also begin to kind of adjust these as needed. So now that we've set that up, let's just move this down here, right? Let's make sure we set up our cards to our correct variables. So right now this is grays, black. Let's make this be our semantic value, our foreground text. And just for the sake of ease and time, I'm going to select all of these texts to be our foreground text. There we go. And then I'm going to select the card, like the background color of our card. Here we go. Right now it's fill. I'm going to set its card right there, background card. And let's we have these options. Because we've already created these light, dark, and Barbie modes, we can now begin to benefit from that. So here, this layer has this property associated with it, has a variable mode. And you can see that those modes, when you click on it. So this is the layer. This is the card that I was working with. I can come over here and I can go to my semantic values collection, which now has modes. And I can say, okay, light mode, it's defaulting to that. Now we have dark mode and we have Barbie mode, right? And I can just duplicate these out and I can select that first one again. And I can change that back to light mode, and I can go to the second one and I could change that to dark mode. So I have all three here. And if I can begin to change this even more, right? So let's just say I'm going to click on local variables. There we go. So we got our three modes. We can also use this to control things like spacing, right? So let's say I want my dark mode to have more spacing. I can increase the units of dark mode, and I can increase that spacing just a little bit more. So I can increase the base unit spacing so it's opened up a little bit more. So there's other values that can be applied as well. So I'm gonna show one more cool example. Let's say this card title, right? The title of the card can be applied as a variable, like a string variable, basic text. So I'm going to create a new variable, local variables. Here we go. I'm going to create that variable, and this is going to be a string. String just means that it's human readable text. And I'm going to call this, the mode dash name, right? The mode name is now a variable. Let me make it all lowercase. There we go. So for light mode, I'm going to say light mode with an exclamation point. For dark mode, I'm going to be like Vader mode. Oops, Vader mode. And then we got Barbie mode with Barbie mode. So that means that this text, anything that is referencing that text will now change. So here in our main component, I can select that text field. There's a little variable icon right there that can be applied. I'm going to apply it, and I'm going to find that mode name, and you'll see that mode name now comes through. So I can see light mode, Vader mode, and Barbie mode showing all of those values. All right. So I know we are going ahead to questions. Let me just think really quick to see if there's anything else I did want to cover with this. There is a lot here. There's plenty of additional content. Oh, I'm going to show y'all one more thing. Boolean variables. I just want to show Boolean variables and how that works. So when I'm defining a component, right? Let's say I'm making this as a component. There's maybe things that you want to show or hide. So let's say, for instance, this brand bar that we have here, right? We got that brand bar. um, what I can do is, let's pull up the local variables and let's say I want to change it. So brand secondary, I'm going to make this, I'm going to break that, make it more Barbie, or make it more dark for dark mode, right? And then here I'm going to break this for Barbie mode, make that like a little bit pink, right? And you're going to see those changes happen in real time, right? But let's say for Vader mode, we want to hide that bar. Like we don't have a need for that bar anymore, right? So what we could do is apply a new variable, an on-off variable, which is known as Booleans. So I can come over here to our original component, and over here there's a layer option, and there's a little eyeball. This one's a bit hidden. Admittedly, it's hidden, but I can right click on that eyeball. Oops. Let me see. No, did they change it? I think they might have changed it on me. Let's see. Hold on. This is the main component. Let's go to my layers. Here we go. Right click. No. Huh. Figma prowess. I think sometimes they be updating and changing things. So like I always have to be kind of mindful of that. It should be right here. I think because, oh, you know what? Let me see. There we have that property. I'm just gonna try one thing really quick. So here I'm going to go to my layer. I think they changed it. Which is, oh, I know why. I know why it's not going to work, because I don't have any Boolean variables yet. Okay, so I'm going to click on my local variables. I'm going to head on over here. I'm going to create a new variable. This variable is going to be a Boolean variable. Our Boolean variable is going to be called show brand bar, right? Show brand bar, right? And it's going to be true for light mode. It's going to be false for dark mode. And it's going to be true for Barbie mode. Now that I have that, and I can come over here and I can right click. There it is. I found it. There it is. Right click. And there we go. Show brand bar equals true. So now you'll see that it's hidden for this one. So when I go to local variables, it'll show and hide, right, that bar. And I can like turn it on and off for each of those. So that allows you to show and hide something. You do need to have at least a Boolean variable in your variables panel so you can associate with it. So there we go. So I can like easily turn that on and off, right? And I can change these like Barbie variables in real time. The last thing I did want to show you with that is that these variable modes can be inherited. So if I was to create 3 frames, right? Like 3 different layouts, this frame right here, as long as it has a background color. So like let's set its background color. Where is it? Right here, the background, BG card. There we go. So this has a background of BG card, and I'm going to duplicate this frame. I'm going to hold down the option key, drag it, drag it. This one, when I go to the layers panel, because this frame has a variable applied, you will see this variable mode show up, and I can choose dark mode for it. And then this one, I can choose Barbie mode for it. And when I take a component, right, when I take this component is currently set to auto, which means it will match whatever its parent mode is set. So I'm able to drag it across all 3, and you will see it then updates respectively. So we can make that a little bit more fun by giving this a value. Let's just say, this is also going to be BG card, right? Or let's say foreground text. There we go. So this one too, as I change its mode, it's going to reflect on that. And one last thing that's really fun about this is that even when you go to insert the card, right, its properties are right here. So when you click on the card insert, you could change which one it's going to be before you even insert the instance. Cool. So I know we have some questions. I'm gonna head on over to my layers, go to the Q&A for today. Let's see. Let's see. Is there a way to share variables, like make them a library? They're instantly a library. When you click on the desktop and go publish library, those variables are now available for other people to use as long as they are in the same team. Why should I choose variables instead of styles? For example, and for colors, using variables is going to give you the ability to do a bit of that theming, and the ability to just have more control and expression over applying semantic values. But like I said, the theming and the branding, I think, is going to be the biggest win for using the variables. So is there a way to import traditional components as variables all at once? So I'm not exactly sure what you're asking here. When you're building things out, you still need to associate and apply those values. You can always use command / select and like select text layers, or select similar values. So when I hit command / or command P, I could say select all with same properties, so I can find and scope objects that have the same properties and change them in mass. So that might be one way to answer your question. I'm not quite sure exactly what it was. When it comes to prototyping, what's the best way to test variables? In my opinion, working with modes. I think you only get about 4 modes with Figma variables on a pro team. But the best way to test them, I mean, variables mean a different thing when you're prototyping. So that's always up for consideration, but you can always change out your modes. You can use modes for swapping out languages. You could use modes for swapping out values and numbers. So there's a lot to think there with regards to what it is that you're trying to test. And oh, when it comes to prototyping, to test your prototype, share a link. You can observe other folks using a prototype. When you select a few shapes, what are the other 2 inputs below corner radius? So when you select a polygon, the other value that shows up is just the number of sides. When you choose an ellipse, the other values that you get are the arc tool and the ratio. So the values that show up under here just give you more non-destructive control over the different properties of that shape. So if I was to choose the star tool, the star tool has kind of like the angling for the star as well as the number of points for the star. So that's always a favorite demonstration point of mine. Let's see. Can you create specific primitive variables for tokens? Is this considered best practice? Been using this approach? Yeah. So creating those specific variables and then aliasing them with the more semantic values, I think, is the ideal way to go. Some folks have kind of like 3 layers of that aliasing. The reason that you want to do that is exactly the way that I demonstrated today, where you create those base variables that are associated with those colors. Then you created another level where they're alias, so then you can theme them out with the modes, because when they're based off of their function, such as corner radius or highlight label, when you change the mode, the highlight label might be red in one and then a different color in another. So referencing the base color is going to be the better way to go, as opposed to just referencing red and then changing it to yellow. It's better to have that layer of tokens that are referencing the behavior or the job of that particular object. Be sure to check out some of our other videos on YouTube highlighting other aspects in the way that we break them down specific for EDU. Really appreciate you all for joining today. So I just want to give you a great thank you from me and Alex. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.